Welcome to this episode of Law Pod with me, Dr. Nora Burns, and PhD students Aislinn Fanning and Seanin Little. This podcast focuses on the Student Skills Assistance Programme in the School of Law at Queen's University Belfast. The programme began in November 2021 as a COVID-19 response to support undergraduate students with their transition to university. I have worked as a coordinator of the programme for the past 4 years, and Aislinn and Seanin were two of the first Student Skills Assistants, SSAs, to be recruited. Over 20 postgraduate students have worked as SSAs over the past 4 years. The programme initially only worked with first-year students, but in its second year it expanded to include second and third-year students. The programme focuses on educational workshops and small community building events. For today's conversation, Aislinn and Seanin will reflect on their role as Student Skills Assistants. We might start with Seanin and Aislinn introducing themselves briefly. Seanin, if you want to go first.
Thanks for having me on today. My name is Seanin Little and I am a PhD student at the law school. I'm finishing off my PhD, soon to be handed in. I am looking at the experience of victimisation in rural areas in Northern Ireland. I've been a student skills assistant from my first year of my PhD to now my fourth year of my PhD. It's been great to see the programme grow from strength to strength throughout the year.
Brilliant, thank you, Seanin. And Aislinn.
Thank you so much, Nora. My name is Aislinn Fanning and I'm just finishing up my PhD in the law school. My PhD uses feminist and queer theory to analyse anti-discrimination law in Northern Ireland since 1998. I've been a student skills assistant since the beginning of the programme in 2021, and it's been a real pleasure to see the programme grow and to be able to be a part of developing the programme into what it is now.
Seanin, what did you do as a skills assistant on a weekly basis?
So I don't think there was any standard weekly overview. That was what I really liked about the role as well, was that there was so much flexibility and there was just so many different things that we did. So we did run workshops. It would be the likes of on problem questions or reading and thinking critically and on a scholar referencing. On top of that as well, we did social and educational trips. For example, we done trips to the cinema, to Queen's Film Theatre, and we also done educational trips such as to Crumlin Road Jail and to the courts as well. On top of that, we did provide more one-to-one support to students. So if any students did need support through, for example, what way can I fine-tune my writing here, we provided that support as well. So
brilliant. Anything you want to add, Aislinn?
There's not really much I could add to that, only that the varied nature of the job is something that I really enjoyed as well. In the beginning, I think we were finding our feet. We were doing desk-based research and setting up the workshops and trying to find out from students what they wanted to see in the workshops and what they wanted to have support with. And I think one of the really special things about the programme was that it was student-led and we gave students the opportunity to tell us what they needed from us and then we put that into action. I don't think you get that very often in programmes like this.
I think that's a really important point because from the very early days, even though it was during COVID-19, at the very start of the programme, we always consulted with the student societies, the student clubs and the student voice committee at the undergraduate level. So we were always able to get feedback on what was working for them and what they needed as the semester progressed. I suppose we were starting during COVID, which meant a lot of what we were offering at the start had to be online. And we moved to an in-person focus then for our second, third and fourth years. And again, as part of that transition, we talked to the students about when they needed their workshops. Again, due to cost of living concerns, the students would have identified that they would appreciate having a lot of the workshops during their timetables calendar, so in between their classes, rather than having them separate in the evenings where they would have to come back on campus and pay additionally for travel costs. I think it is important that we did consult students a lot to check what they needed. It was important that we had variety. We did a lot of small group social events. Some of those cinema trips would have been 8 or 10 students, which was nice, particularly for first years, to get to know each other in an environment where they weren't under as much pressure. There weren't that many people there. They got to make friends with a second or a third year who then would act as an unofficial mentor to them. We had much larger events. We had Lunar New Year 3 years ago for 120 students in the Great Hall here in Queen's. We did a lot of very small events and then much larger events. And then, as you mentioned, the educational workshops. On a weekly basis, we would have 2 to 3 events. There would be a team of 5 student skills assistants Every event was managed and designed by 2 skills assistants in partnership with myself. It would mean that we would have 1 to 2 educational workshops a week and then 1 social event per week, whether that was tea and coffee, a movie in the moot courtroom, a table quiz, or something which would cost a little bit more, like a trip to the Crumlin Road Jail or to the cinema here at the Queen's Film Theatre. So that's just to give an overview of how we worked on a weekly basis. In terms of timing, we worked only during the semester, but then obviously the SSAs would be part of induction week and they would also help students with preparing for their exams. One really great thing you guys did this year was the blog and the podcast on exam prep. Aislinn, you were part of the podcast on exam prep. Do you want to tell us about how that worked?
Yes, I will indeed. Coming up to the 7-hour take-home exams was something that I think a lot of the students were quite nervous and anxious about, because these were students who were used to doing exams in an exam hall at school, or no exams at all because they'd been at school during COVID where they didn't have exams. We recognised quite early on that it was causing a lot of anxiety in students. We identified it as an area where we could provide support. We worked closely with the undergraduate students who were part of the law pod team and some of the undergraduate students through the societies in the school to find out what sorts of questions they had and what sorts of questions that we could provide tips and advice in answer to. So we gathered the questions up, and as a team of student skills assistants who all had varied experiences of sitting exams. I had a bit of experience with take-home exams because I graduated in 2020. I did my final exams in that first wave of take-home exams when everybody was trying to work out the best way to do that. So I was able to draw on my own experience, and some of the other student skills assistants had done those styles of exams at different times. So everybody bundled together to give our best advice and tips, not just on doing the exam prep, but also preparing yourself to sit that kind of exam. So what can you do for yourself beyond making notes and memorising things? Also, how do you look after yourself when you're preparing for those kinds of exams, and how do you make sure you are the best version of yourself when you sit that exam was very important to us and to the students as well. We got those together and we wrote a blog post, and then we sat down here in the studio with Richard and we recorded the Law Pod episode, and the feedback on that has been very good, and students said that it was really helpful and helped them prepare for those exams a bit better.
And I think that's one of the real strengths of the skills programme over the last 4 years, is that you all worked really well cohesively as a team because you all had very different skill sets. And they were very complementary skill sets. Seanin, were there any particular skills you think you developed over your time as a skills assistant?
My answer is going to link into something Aislinn had said there about, talking to the students. So what Aislinn had spoke to her about that podcast and that support all came from those conversations afterwards, having that talks with students, being that approachable person for them to come up and actually be like, I'm struggling with this, I need more help like this. I'm thinking even one about the feedback, understanding your feedback and reading your feedback workshop that we had that was really well attended after the assignment marks came out. And I think throughout the student skills assistant role, one of the things that as someone looking to go into academia as a career, I think it's getting that value of that pastoral support you can provide to students. So being able to have them conversations after, identify that need that they have, whether it's I'm struggling, how to structure a paragraph, or I'm struggling with maybe my note taking, just those informal conversations, and then that retention, building up on how you can provide that pastoral care was really kind of the skill set for me that I kind of developed further.
I suppose a kind of connected question to you both is how you managed to do the skills assistance role with your own PhD study and how you worked on a weekly basis.
Well, I think it really helped because we did have that planning and development. Like we did plan our workshops a couple of months in advance, so you knew what was coming ahead. I think the Student Skills Assistant programme helped me have structure and routine with my own PhD. If I knew I had a deadline at the end of the month, I did communicate that with you, Nora. Communicating and being like, I have this deadline and this takes priority or whatever else. I do think that was a big one, structuring ahead and being able to say this R2 is for student skills assistant work, this stuff is for PhD. But it's even whenever students will see you downstairs in the junction or cafe at the law school, if they want to speak to you about their skills development, just being like, okay, I'll speak to you, are you free this day? So it's even balancing them time, having that kind of, that structure there that you can be like, talk to me on this day, or being able to put a barrier there as well and balance your routine between the both.
I agree. It's about being organised and managing your time and learning to have that discipline with yourself and being strict about what this block of time is for. And I think that's one of the most important skills that I've learned from being a student skills assistant and being a teaching assistant while doing the PhD. It's about learning to say no, or learning to say not now, but another time. And those are things I would have struggled with before being a student skills assistant and doing the PhD all at once.
I think I'll add an extra point, Aislinn. I think one of the things that we got a lot of value out of as well was how well the student skills assistants worked as a team. We were all in the same boat, PhD researchers or master students. And it was being able to say, I don't have the capacity this week to take on another one-to-one. Aislinn, would you mind doing that? If it was something, for example, I'm coming through the law school with an interdisciplinary background and maybe it was something a bit more strict on law, I could say, Gary, would you mind helping this student with her problem question? I think there was that flexibility there, and there was that mutual understanding that sometimes someone could be busy. Like, it was a really friendly environment. We could say, yeah, I'll help you. Or if I saw someone stressed, I'd be like, I'll pick that up and you can help me in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we all gelled really well together as a team. And in subsequent years, when there were different student skills assistants involved in the programme, I think overall we all worked really well together and worked in that very collegiate way. So that was a really nice way of working. And I think it's also something that I got from the programme is that Seanin and I made friends. We weren't friends before we became student skills assistants and PhD students, and we became best friends and we lived together and everything throughout the programme. So that's maybe not something as strictly academic or professional, but it's a really valuable thing that we got out of the programme. And coming back to that question about what we got from the programme in terms of skills, one of the biggest things for me is the confidence on the education and the teaching side of things. I was really shy when I started my PhD, and I never imagined myself enjoying standing up in front of a room of 70 students. I think we had a few occasions where we actually had to say, in terms of health and safety, we can't fit any more students in this room, which is lovely to see, but it's something that I think 3 years ago would have really intimidated me. In the third year of the programme, I applied for an associate fellowship of the Higher Education Academy, which is a teaching accreditation. I don't think that I ever would have gotten to that stage if it hadn't been for the skills I learned as a student skills assistant. So that's something that I really got out of it.
I think a really important point as well is that both of you were very open to supporting student societies. From our very early days of working on the programme, we did notice it can be difficult to reach students. Students receive a huge amount of email traffic and may not read all of their emails. So we did realise that partnering with student societies and student clubs, which are very active here in the law school, was the way in which we could best reach out to students and ensure that there were more students at events, but also the students were feeding into the design of events and helping us to know what best served them. Both of you were excellent in terms of supporting particular student groups. So Seanin, tell us a little bit about your work with the Student Women in Law Society here in the law school.
So Women in Law is a student-led committee at the School of Law. And what they do is they host educational events for students, run an alumni mentoring programme and facilitate a networking event. This was with all the overarching purpose of building the confidence of our female students and inspiring them to go into legal careers. The group would run monthly events. They have their monthly and their wellness event. So I would support them through those events, helping them prepare, having their plan in place. I suppose where I've placed most of my support is through being a soundboard for their mentorship programme and their big alumni event, which usually runs in March every year. So with the mentorship programme, they would have female students at the School of Law mentored off with female professionals. And the amount of work that goes into that is enormous. Recruiting students, getting them paired off with a mentor, recruiting mentors in as well would be a big one. finding what the student's niche is, but what's the mentor's niche. So there's the most value out of that programme. Running events, doing follow-up, making sure that there's the right amount of communication, that everyone's feeling supported. And then that will then run into the alumni event. I'm probably mostly a soundboard for that, being able to be that kind of middle person between the committee and the School of Law who supports the event. So this year in particular, they actually had a different plan. So usually it was the networking beforehand and then going in and having your keynote speeches. Whereas this year they wanted just to try something new with the programme. So it went in through a keynote speech by Fionnuala Ní Uaillinn, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Counterterrorism and Human Rights. So she done the keynote speech. And then there was a roundtable discussion with the Lady Chief Justice, Siobhan Keegan, and Madam Justice McBride, the judge in residence. Throughout that process, it was providing them support and making sure they weren't running over time, making sure the food was there and kind of having that support and kind of the background running, just making sure even like consent for photographs, those details. But it was entirely student-led. And they have been great. Aislinn will talk now more about the Walkie Girlies, but even Aislinn's collaboration with them and then my collaboration with Women in Law, you did find that there was quite like some nuances between both groups and that they were able to work in collaboration, which was really nice. And then you had our outreach to students through that. So being able to talk to other students, they promoted our workshops and everything like that. It was a great initiative and I've got so much from that. And I know this year is my last year as a student skills assistant. Even at the networking event, they called me up and presented me with flowers. And I just thought even that was such a nice touch. The value and appreciation they have for you in that role, it meant the world. So yeah.
So one of the things that we focused on in the last couple of years is encouraging students to be more confident and to think more about how they can benefit the law school student community themselves and build community themselves rather than us just imposing community on them. So in the past few years in the law school, we've had a huge flourishing environment of student-led and created societies. So we had Barbara, who founded the Animal Law Society, Georgia and Aisling, who founded the Walkie Girlies, which Aisling will talk about in a minute. Georgia also founding the Commercial Awareness Society, new Students Against Human Trafficking Society, the new ELSA Society. So it has been wonderful for students being confident about coming forward and leading on events. Aisling, you worked closely with the Walkie Girlies since their creation in the law school. Could you tell us about the Walkie Girlies and what that work looked like with them?
Yes, absolutely. So the Walkie Girlies just finished their second year as a society, and it started out of a really small idea between two friends. So two law students decided they didn't really have a safe space or feel safe to go walking even in pairs or on their own on the streets. There was a lot of conversation about violence against women and girls, and so they decided they would like to set up a society, the Walkie Girlies, where they would get people together, girls, boys, anyone, who would go on walks in company and meet new friends. If you were in Belfast on your own, that was the idea. So Aislinn and Georgia decided to organise their first walk. And I've been in so many situations where people ask Aislinn, how many people came to your first walk? And I think they're expecting like 5. And Aislinn says something like 75. And so it was a hit from the beginning. They were onto something. And then it was an absolute pleasure to watch the Walkie Girlies go from that first walk to being ratified through the Students' Union as a society to then organising their really big event, Project Pink, in November of last year, which I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially that is their goal, to get together, go on community walks. And I think it really is about building that sense of community and belonging and about raising awareness for women's safety as well. And I think they have gone beyond that as well in terms of they've organised lovely community building events in the school and in collaboration with Women in Law as well. So that's been a nice thing to see those collaborations grow naturally. But Project Pink, I think, is one of the big events that they've organised and that I've supported them with. So I met with the leaders of the society quite regularly, so usually about once a month or once every couple of weeks during the semester. And they had decided that it would be a nice idea to do something in November because you have 16 days of activism against violence against women and girls. and they decided then to organise a walk from Queen's, from the Lanyon building to Belfast City Hall. I really, like Seanin with Women in Law, was a sounding board for them. Every time we met, I helped them with practical things. I kind of gave them feedback on the ideas that they had and helped maybe put them in touch with people that they would need to help them organise things. And when they had this idea, I thought it was a great idea. One of the things that I always encouraged them to do was to think big and be ambitious. If people say no, they say no, but you might as well try. So they decided then that it would be a great idea to raise awareness to have the Lanyon building and Belfast City Hall lit up pink. And that was no mean feat. And I think one of the most admirable and impressive things that they did during the course of that was to persevere with those requests. And on the day then, or on the evening, they had the Lanyon building lit up pink, and then the walk from the Lanyon building to Belfast City Hall, which was also lit up pink. And that's where the name Project Pink came from. So Seanin and I went along that evening, and it was great fun. Everyone was in their high-vis pink jackets, and my job was to break the glow sticks and to hand them out to everyone, pink glow sticks. And I have to say, Aisling and Shauna and the rest of the Walkie Talkie Girlies committee were beyond impressive on the evening. The professionalism that they conducted themselves with was amazing, and it's been one of the great privileges for me in supporting them, was seeing them grow in confidence. I remember when they were really shy first year and second year students who couldn't have imagined engaging with City Council, with estates here at Queen's, with the Parades Commission to organise a big walk like that, to have roads closed, with the PSNI to have security there. The security protocols were impressive beyond belief. They had everyone's details. They knew exactly what to do if anything was to go wrong, and nothing did, but everything was in order on the evening. And they had 500 people walk from Queen's to Belfast City Hall, and it was a really lovely atmosphere. Then the committee member spoke at Belfast City Hall, and the Lord Mayor at the time attended as well. So I think that's been one of the main things in my mind that sticks out as a highlight of my time as a student skills assistant, and it was a pleasure to support them in organising that as well.
And to both of you, how do you think you developed skills through supporting Women in Law and the Walkie Talkie Girlies?
I think the main thing there is developing a mentoring role and realising that you enjoy that role. And I think when you take on that mentoring role, you learn about yourself that you do have something to give and you do know things, and you can help support students, which is really important if you want to go into an academic job. So I think that's something that I developed in that confidence. I would also say in the school as a whole, it gave me the skill of being able to engage with and involve different people. So it involved engaging with professional services staff in the school, with academic staff in the school, and with students. So I think that was a skill that I learned from that too.
Yeah, I think there's this immense sense of pride in the students and what they have achieved. And I think that's valuable in itself. So again, I'm going back to this pastoral side of education. And I think that's a part of legal education that is so important whenever you are dealing with heavy subjects and everything that comes with learning. When you're dealing with complex policies and procedures, and then what it is students getting together and they are being the motivators for building a sense of community in the law school. They're advocating for their students' needs, and this is what we go back to in our job as student skills assistant in our workshops. They're all student led with conversations afterwards. What do you need support with? One of the things that they emphasise is accessibility of education. So making sure there's tea at their events, making sure there's food if possible at their events. It all goes back to that pastoral role and being able to provide that support. And it is nice, us in our positions, that we're not staff per se, we're not academic staff in the university, and we're not necessarily students. So we are that middle ground. They do come and asking questions that they think are silly, and being able to be that person that they can come to and ask questions. So yeah, going back to that, what did it give you? It's kind of developing them skills and being able to be that approachable person that people can talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that too that during the time when I was a student skills assistant, I also became a teaching assistant in the school. And I think having been part of the student skills assistant programme for a year before I started doing that, and then as a student skills assistant alongside doing that, it really made me a better teacher. And I understood what students want from their tutorials and what students need from their tutorials. And I was able to approach that armed with a lot more knowledge than I would have been had I not been part of this programme. So that's something else that it's given me, and that's also a really important part about building an academic career too.
So as part of the Student Skills Assistance Programme, one of our priorities over the last 4 years has been to ensure that we've worked with a diversity of students from rural and urban backgrounds, students who live at home a distance away from the university, students who are living in student halls, international students who have to work full-time or nearly full-time to fund their studies. We've always prioritised working with a diverse group of students. Seanin, can I ask, would you reflect on some of the experiences you've had working with a diversity of students through the programme?
I keep going back to this point on student retention and that pastoral support. And I think that is one of the most important things that this programme has provided. I'm the first in my family to be university educated. And I think back to my undergraduate and the support and care I was provided going through my degree. And that is literally what has got me here today as a PhD student. And I think it's just, being able to provide that back to students that maybe are in the same position as I was. I think maybe one of the proudest moments, and it's the weirdest moment to be proud of, throughout my time as a student skills assistant was the first week of induction. We were doing tutorial-based activities, helping the students know what to expect in their tutorials and the best way that they can communicate in their tutorials. After it, one of the students came up to me and she was like, "I'm so glad you're so normal." It's the weirdest compliment, but it was a nice compliment. And I think she maybe came in with a certain expectation of what background she should have been in, studying a law degree. And it was nice to be able to communicate that to her. I know something that we have spoken about throughout my time as a student skills assistant has been that accessibility point. Workshops in the morning with your tea and coffee, but also hosting sessions in the afternoon. We've tried online for people with caring responsibilities too. That's a main one. Another one that I have found very good is the one-to-one support we've provided. I've provided one-to-one support with some of our international students, especially understanding that for some of them students, English maybe isn't their first language. They're not familiar with our laws here in the UK. So being able to give that extra attention and being able to provide them that additional support has been vital. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the things that we found throughout the last 3 years of doing the programme is that international students can feel particularly lonely in the evenings and at weekends, because in Northern Ireland a lot of students go home at the weekends or even in the evenings sometimes. And I think that worked quite well in terms of having trips to the Queen's Film Theatre in the evenings or having a trip to the Christmas markets or St George's Market at the weekend. And it seems like a really small thing, but I think just having that to look forward to makes a real difference in how a student learns during the week and how they engage with their own programme and how they study and how happy they are as well. I would echo what Seanin said, being a first generation student and making education feel accessible to people from a range of different socioeconomic backgrounds. I supported a lot of students over the last 3 years who met with me and said, "I just don't feel like I belong here. I don't know my way around. This is a completely different language to me. I just feel really overwhelmed." It took me right back to when I started my own law degree, and I remember that exact feeling. It was really nice to be able to support students and say, "Why don't you try doing this? And why don't you try doing that?"
So the skills assistants in the law school are an integral part of the law school community, but we also need to acknowledge that you guys work in collaboration and in parallel to the advisors of studies and the personal tutors who are academic members of staff. We also have wonderful professional services members of staff, such as the student support officer, who you would have worked very closely with, Judith Paxton, around providing support to students with additional wellbeing needs or other issues that were cropping up for them. So you guys were very well supported in terms of the staff in the school also. Another thing that's important to acknowledge is that the Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences faculty and the previous Dean of Education, Professor Robin Hickey, was instrumental in the running of this programme and providing support for it, along with our heads of school and our directors of education. It is a big project to run, and we are grateful for all the support that we have received over the years, as well as the team of skills assistants who we have had the pleasure to work with. Only 2 of you are here today, but you are the 2 longest serving SSAs. But we do want to acknowledge all of the other SSAs also and their collaboration with us. The other thing I want to say today is the importance of how this project worked with students and with staff. So often we would get referrals from the student support officer asking us, could you guys meet with a particular student who needed a little bit of extra support, or a personal tutor would reach out to us. The university supports around the learning development service. So there has been a lot of support there for students in Queen's at the moment. My final question to you both is, if another university law school was thinking about running a project like this, as a skills assistant, what would be your top tips for how to run that project to make sure that it is successful for students?
My biggest piece of advice is to listen to students and ask them what they want help and support with. And then the people running the programme can design a skills support programme around that. And I think it's important to pay attention to the academic skills side of things, but also that community building side of things and the wellbeing aspect of things, because although there are supports there are things that a programme like that can do on a smaller scale to help with those things, and that means the students have a well-rounded experience then.
So I think even in this podcast, there has been a few themes coming out from the Student Skills Assistant programme. So again, going back to that student-led point, going back to the pastoral point, and going back to the mentorship. And I think we're able to provide that support as student skills assistants is because we're getting that from our line management, which is yourself, Nora. You have been an approachable member of staff for us, and you have been a mentor in our own professional development. So it's getting that mentorship, echo that onto the students then, from being first year in the programme, my first year as a student skills assistant, having that ability to be innovative. Like the amount of times I came up to you and been like, oh, I have an idea, and you're like, okay, Seanin, what is it? But it is having the room to be able to do that, and that does help us with our professional development. Having that support allows us then to provide that support to the students. So we would like to thank you personally as well.
Thank you very much. They were not paid to say any of this. Having the 2 of you there from the start, and you being then able to mentor new skills assistants who came in and joined the programme on a yearly basis, has been hugely helpful also, because it meant that there was someone there that they could go and speak to in addition to myself about how they could build their skills. So it has been invaluable having you both involved. And we will leave it there, and thank you for joining us for this episode of LawPod.